Broadcasting from the Cass Corridor in Detroit, it's the Metro, WDET's daily news and culture show. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. Today on the program, we'll discuss some local and national newsmakers that we're keeping an eye on in the new year.
Plus, the Temple Bar recently reopened after the building partially collapsed last spring. We'll discuss this Detroit institution with owner George Boukas.
And we'll listen back to some recent conversations on the Metro that have us looking forward to the new year.
And we'll learn about a group that's empowering young people and connecting them to important resources. But first, it's a new year. And here on the Metro, we've got our eyes on many stories. A lot happened last year. We saw President Biden step down as a candidate, with Vice President Harris taking his place. We saw an assassination attempt on now President-elect Trump's life at a rally, and then he later won the popular vote. In local politics, there was news too. Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan announced he wouldn't run for re-election in 2025. Instead, he wants to lead the state as governor. And in the legislature, the Michigan Democrats concluded 2 years of a so-called trifecta government with an ineffective lame duck session.
Ooh, Tia, that's a lot. And then there's inflation and interest rates, which came down, but prices for groceries, healthcare, and housing continue to feel too expensive for many Americans. Wars in Ukraine and Gaza raged on. Israel also invaded Lebanon, followed by a ceasefire there, and the Bashar al-Assad regime fell to rebel fighters after a civil war in Syria that lasted more than a decade. We also saw severe weather displace thousands and cause billions of dollars in damage from hurricanes and tornadoes. Mother Nature brought some beautiful things too, though. We saw the northern lights in Detroit and a total solar eclipse.
Which I did not look at. Did not look at that. Meanwhile, Detroit hosted 775,000 visitors for the NFL draft. And the Lions are having their best season in generations right now. What a time to be alive and be a Lions fan. America's team. And that's just scratching the surface. Now, we do want to take a look ahead at stories we're keeping an eye on as a team on the Metro here. And here to talk to us a little bit more about what they're following, we've got our producers, Sam Corey, Carrie Jr. II, and David Lyons here. Welcome on this side of the mic, guys.
Oh, thanks so much.
Good morning. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year. So, Sam, we're starting with you. Let's talk about what's on your mind for 2025. Let's start local. What are you looking at for Detroit and Metro Detroit?
Yeah, well, y'all had just a really long list of interesting, inspiring, sad, a lot of different things happened last year, as you know, they'll continue this year. And you mentioned one of them that I do want to talk about, Mayor Mike Duggan. Specifically him running as an independent candidate for governor. I know a lot of folks are talking about this. I think they're talking about it for a lot of different reasons. One, Mayor Duggan's a savvy politician, and he had a really good 3 terms as mayor, according to a lot of folks. He is a very pragmatic person. He's not an ideologue, but he got things done when people asked him to get streetlights on, to remove blight, to add speed bumps. He used federal dollars to clean up parks. And he renewed rec centers. Like, there's a lot that he worked on, and he sat with people for a very, very, very long time. And then he tried to just accomplish what people asked for. Leaving my own, opinions aside, he's just a quite popular person. And so for him to decide to run for governor is a big deal. But then for him to decide to run as an independent is just enormous. I mean, there's a lot of questions about what this will mean for the Democratic Party, I guess to a certain degree nationally, but really in the state of Michigan, locally, how it changes potentially, how it tries to adapt to his run. And I don't know all the calculus. I want to learn a little bit more about why he's running as an independent, but there's got to be a good reason for it because he's won before and presumably he really wants this position. So this is something that I'm looking at, and there's a lot to look into there.
Sam, I'm curious, do you think that Duggan running as an independent could help or hurt him?
Well, I don't know the answer to that. Again, I think the big thing is, like, he did this for a reason. I don't think he just did this for show, or he's trying to like change our political culture. I think he's actually trying to win. And so he thought that this was the most strategic thing to do. Now, Michigan is a purple state, so there's something there, but like he's one of the most prominent Democrats in the state, certainly in Southeast Michigan. And so for him to decide to do that, there's calculus there. Maybe he didn't think he would win the primary. There's other people, other pretty big names that he's got to go against. So, it's a question that I'm very curious about, because I think it was strategic, and I want to sort of unravel that and also try to understand how it's going to shake up our local politics.
I mean, there's something to be said about the divisiveness of our politics today, right? And maybe, I don't know this to be true, but for Duggan specifically, but maybe there's something about saying I don't want to be associated with either a Democratic or Republican Party, because I know that means that people will come with their own preconceived notions about what I can do for this state, and he thinks that maybe he can transcend that. I don't know, but that's an interesting way to approach it nowadays, considering how politics has played out for the last long time, I guess. So,
yeah.
Carrie, what about you? What are you keeping an eye on in 2025?
Well, after that intro, I wanted to go Lions. I wanted to be like, I'm looking out for this Lions playoff run.
What?
We're going to go all the way to the Super Bowl.
That's a shocking statement.
That is something I'm very excited about, and I'm antsy in my seat about it. But kind of legitimately taking, I didn't want to say piggybacking, but I am kind of piggybacking off of Sam's point. It's about the mayoral race in the city of Detroit. So, of course, Mayor Mike Duggan, because of everything Sam just said, set a pretty strong precedent in the city of Detroit. And so I'm keeping an eye on how the race shapes up. I mean, now that he's no longer going to be the mayor up in November, I'm wondering what the candidates who are going to be entering the field and how they're going to be framing their races particularly, and how we're going to prepare for a regime change. I don't need to go back and rehash kind of the legacy I think Duggan has left for the city of Detroit, but this last decade, we reported the first population increase since 1957. Like, that's a big deal for folks in the city here. And then, you can also certainly point to the development that's happened throughout the city as an indication that the city is moving in a positive direction. But as I said, the field is shaping up, so I'm interested to see how people distinguish themselves from one another. And kind of more importantly, I'd like to know what their main aims are for the future of the city. There's been a lot of discussion about whether the development that's happened is going to continue to happen in neighborhoods. And there have been efforts in strategic neighborhood initiatives from the city, but I'm wondering if there's going to be a candidate that emerges that's going to be like, this is my platform. I'm here for the neighborhoods, or someone else might come in and say, hey, I think Duggan laid a strong blueprint for the city of Detroit. Let me follow in his footsteps. So curious to know what that shapes out to look like, because there's been amazing efforts throughout the city from its residents up until today to keep it, thriving as it has been for the decades long. But we do know that Detroit has struggled politically in the past. And so we're still in a very sensitive moment. So it's going to be really important to see who takes the mantle from Duggan's tenure and continues to move the city forward.
And now a part of Duggan's legacy is this historic decrease in homicides and violent crimes.
Right.
But there are plenty of folks saying that's just because the Lions are winning. So.
If they're related. Yeah.
Are there particular issues that you're looking out for, that you think will really come to the fore in the mayoral election?
Me personally, no. I think for me, one thing that's always been, I think, on the minds of residents here has been crime and safety here. How will we handle that? I think one other thing that Mayor Duggan has done is improve the relationship between the city council and the mayor's office. I just want to make sure the city functions properly. I think that's really kind of my biggest thing is, are you going to step in office and be an efficient mayor that gets things done, right? And that we see a city that can kind of thrive off of a government that's functioning in the way that it should.
It seems like so much of that is local politics, is functioning or not.
Yeah.
Are things getting done or are they not? Or at least are you trying?
And to your point earlier, you talked about all the services that he's been able to bring back. We don't want a regression in that area. We want to see an increase in all of that, and we want that to go all throughout the city, right? Is my trash getting picked up? Are my lights on? All that kind of stuff.
So public transit's a huge issue.
Right.
DDOT is not on time. So yeah.
And Robin,
yes.
As for you, what are you looking forward to in 2025? I guess your 2025 learning resolutions.
Yeah, I'm thinking a lot about the political path forward for Arab Americans in Metro Detroit. And here's why. This is something we've talked about a lot on the Metro. The 2024 presidential election results show that Arab American voters are really unhappy with the Democratic Party. They're angry that the Biden-Harris administration has sent Israel billions in military aid that's funding the Israeli war in Gaza. And this is all despite calls from the United Nations and people all over the world for a ceasefire. And, as a result, President-elect Donald Trump, he won 42% of voters in Dearborn, and Jill Stein captured 18% of the vote. We had a political analyst, Dennis Darnoy, tell us that that was more than any other place in Michigan, how many votes Jill Stein captured. So Arab Americans in Michigan, they're a powerful group. They were at the center of the uncommitted movement, which sent a message to the Biden and Harris administration about their strong disapproval of the war in Gaza. So I'm wondering how Arab Americans are going to continue to push for change with Trump in office. It's going to be really interesting to watch how this plays out, given Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu have a close relationship. They kind of seem like besties. Trump spoke with Netanyahu several times just days after he was elected, and he's already appointed Mike Huckabee as the U.S. ambassador to Israel. And Huckabee has argued against an Israeli ceasefire. He's called Israel's illegal settlements in the West Bank that have forcibly displaced Palestinians communities. So we also know that in his previous term as president, Trump strongly favored Israel. He recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. He moved the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And he also ended U.S. funding to the UN agency that helps Palestinian refugees. So all of this has me really wondering what we're going to see from Arab Americans in Metro Detroit. And it has me thinking about Dearborn Mayor Abdullah Hammoud, who's become a de facto spokesperson for Arab Americans. He's really put Dearborn on the map with his national media appearances. He's been speaking out against Israel's war in Gaza and the need for Democrats to take action. So we'll continue to follow his political career as well.
What do you think are the political alliances that might happen? We had someone on the show who's talking a little bit about the idea that, the idea of voting for Trump was to intentionally create a backlash where Arab folks here in Southeast Michigan and across the country could rally around Democrats because there had been a schism between Democrats. Do you think that's the route? Do you think more folks will try to align themselves with the Republican Party or, I don't know, independents or something else? What do you think some of the actions will be?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sam. I think it's going to hinge on how Trump ends up behaving in terms of the war in Gaza, because he's promised to end it. And so I think that a lot of Arab Americans are a little bit, they're cautiously optimistic that perhaps he's going to fulfill this promise. And I think that how he acts when it comes to this war is going to determine the path that Arab Americans in Metro Detroit take.
You're listening to the Metro on WDET, and we're talking about the stories that are on our radar for 2025. The show's producers are here with us, Carrie Jr. II, Sam Corey, to talk about some of the local stories that they were interested in. Excuse me, it's that time of year. So now we're going to take a zoom and look into what's happening nationally really quickly. Just get quick moments of what's happening nationally. Once again, for me, it's TikTok ban, the ban of TikTok, the over... I don't even know how to even put it into words, but free speech and what it means for free speech as we go forward, what it means for the economy that TikTok has created, the creators, the users. When this is shut down, what does it mean for that? What does it mean for this whole ecosystem that has been created out of TikTok? And I've found so many resources and people and conversations that we've brought to you here on the Metro from TikTok. So it's going to be interesting to see how the world and the role of social media kind of shapes and that landscape changes when we see this large mega giant of TikTok being banned. And then as well, the just why we are focusing so much on TikTok when there are so many other things that are happening in our country. I don't think TikTok is probably the most important thing to be focused on right now. So it's just very interesting to see where our priorities are as a country right now. So I'm just following along with this to see what our country's going to do.
Do you think another platform would step in and become? Is there anything else that you would compare to TikTok right now?
No. No, I honestly don't.
I don't think Reels is making it come up.
I don't.
No?
I believe anything that Zuckerberg's connected to in terms of the social media landscape it doesn't have a comparison to what TikTok's been able to do in terms of outreach.
That's fair. TikTok has disrupted the music
industry.
It's
disrupted all types of all industries. So it's very interesting to see what's going to happen if it's pulled out.
Well, the ban, and to be clear, the ban hasn't happened yet. But there's deep talks about it, and of course, a lot of this is tied to anti-Chinese sentiment and sort of anti-immigrant sentiment. This is really funny though too, because you sort of we had the same thing. I'm really curious about nationally what's happening with social media bans and phone bans. Particularly, we've been talking about this in schools. There's the Gibraltar and Allen Park school districts downriver that ban phones. Keep them out of the classroom. This is really interesting to me because I find social media, and a lot of research finds social media to be highly addictive, right? I mean, this is how the model works. They're intentionally trying to keep our attention hooked and get our data mined, which is then sold off to advertisers. We don't pay for it with dollars. We pay for it with our own data, right? And so that's how they make money. And so I'm really curious about the ways in which we use and debate the goods and bads of social media, all the different ways that it influences our lives. Nationally, I'm going to be looking a lot at these like phone bans in schools and whether, people's grades actually improve or their intention improves or not. Is this the wrong thing to do? I'm not saying that I have the answer. I don't, because there's pros and cons, but it's just really interesting.
Yeah.
We should probably have you on, Sam, to talk about how to stay off of social media. Right? 'Cause you don't have it, right?
I don't understand how he does it.
Just don't.
I don't know how he does it.
How do you do that?
Just don't put it on anything.
I know. I'm going to tag
What
Sam.
a luxury.
I know. I don't have that type of self-control. But we have David Lyons, who actually does have a 2025 topic that he's looking into. So you're there?
Yes.
There we go.
Sorry, I'm trying to pipe in from the other side of the glass here. Well, first I have to say that I also don't have a TikTok, and so I look at the ban from another side. I can see that.
Don't have a TikTok. That was adorable the way you said that.
It's the dad.
But no, I actually do understand the argument that TikTok could be a national security issue because it's a company that's owned by China, who is. From what I've heard, this is anecdotal, but they're destroying the U.S. behind the scenes in the computer science espionage world. We are losing that battle from what I've heard. So I don't think it's just paranoia. I do see anti-social media sentiment, anti-Chinese sentiment also being wrapped up into those arguments and the rhetoric from Trump. But I also see there's some logic to that potentially. We'll see. But I was looking at that same one, Sam. But to me, it also connects. It also connects with who is going to get President-elect Trump's favor as far as big tech and social media companies go. I mean, we've been seeing the CEOs and moguls from all over Silicon Valley go to Trump at they met him at Mar-a-Lago. They're going out and trying to basically make nice right now before his administration really takes hold because they're not sure what's going to happen. And I don't think we are either. And I'm wondering who are going to be the winners and losers in this because surely we're not going to lose big tech in the next 4 years. But it's not necessarily that they're all going to just carry on as they have been. So I'm really curious about who the winners and losers are and how that translates into the social media that we see on our phones.
Does the industry get regulated? Are there are there different constraints on the industry? Does social media need to change? It doesn't have to necessarily be like it's here or it's gone. I mean, there are ways to change these platforms to make them healthier for use,
Yeah, I mean, and if that's what the Trump administration's looking for, that would be great. I would like a healthier use of social media.
Bully-free zone, no bullying.
But this might just be a way of making them more profitable. Who knows? We're going to find out, but I think it's going to be really interesting because we haven't seen this kind of coalescing of these big tech moguls behind a president in this way when there was such a contentious relationship very often. I mean, the free speech issues and the previous election where we saw all the investigations and questions in front of Congress where was Facebook censoring or not censoring enough. So, yeah, that's what I've got my eye on for this year on a national lens.
And that is something that we are going to follow on the Metro. Robin, nationally, what are you looking at?
I'm thinking about homelessness. The rate of homelessness in the U.S. increased by more than 18% nationwide. Wow. That's according to a recent report by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And we know one of the leading causes for this spike is a lack of affordable housing. In 2024, median rent was 18% higher than it was in 2020. And the National Low Income Housing Coalition estimates there's a shortage of 7.3 million units of affordable and available rental homes in the country. And this is all according to the National Alliance to End Homelessness. One thing that organization highlighted from this report is that family homelessness rose by nearly 40%.
Wow.
And even in Metro Detroit, where housing is more affordable than other places, this is still playing out. In Detroit, the Detroit Rescue Mission Ministries, which operates the largest network of shelters in the city, its director, Chad Oddie, told us in December that those shelters are constantly at capacity. So there will be this month a point-in-time count in Metro Detroit, and that's where advocates count how many people are experiencing homelessness on one single night. So we'll be watching that to see what comes from that effort.
Which is something that we're all very passionate about here on the Metro. So really looking forward to all of the stories that we were listening to today from Sam, Corey, producer Carrie Jr. II, as well as producer David Lyons. Thank you all so much for bringing these stories and topics and ideas that you all listeners will hear throughout 2025.
Coming up, the Temple Bar is a staple of our favorite corridor. That's the Cass Corridor. But its future became uncertain when the building partially collapsed last year. We'll talk with the owner of Temple Bar and find out what the bar's fate is right after this. Welcome back to the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. And sometimes you want to go where everyone knows your name. That's the kind of place that Temple Bar owner George Boukas has tried to establish. The spot for drinking and dancing sits on Cass in Detroit and is known for its inclusivity. Oh my goodness. Openness, DJ sets, and longtime bartenders. People who like to come back, George.
That's right. But that dream crashed on May 24th after Temple Bar partially collapsed. To help save the bar, George and the bar's manager raised almost $24,000 on GoFundMe and went through a 7-month-long process with Detroit's Historic Commission to make the proper repairs. And as of mid-December, Temple Bar is now back. To discuss the reopening and all that had to be done to repair the bar, we have the owner here with us, George Boukas. Welcome to the Metro.
Ladies, thank you for having me.
Of course.
So you reopened in mid-December. How's it been going thus far? Has the bar been well attended?
It has been. It's just been amazing, the response we've gotten from our regulars, people that we've never, seen before. The sports fans have been amazing. Everybody's just been glad to see us open again.
Now let's go back. What was your reaction when the bar partially collapsed? It was a stunning thing to see, to walk by, to drive by. Where were you when that happened?
I was in bed.
Oh,
You were safe in bed. Okay, that's
I was
good.
at home in bed. I got a phone call, and I actually hung up on them because they said the bar was on fire. So I'm, first thing I do is I go to my phone and I'm looking at the cameras. I go, there's no fire. The cat's walking on the bar. It was like, okay, this is a prank. So I hung up on him. Called me again. Hung up on. Called me the third time. This is the Detroit police. Please do not hang up on us.
Oh, now we're serious. Please take this seriously now, George.
Yeah. So, they said that they told me the bar was on fire. I go, there's no fire in the bar. I just looked at all the cameras. And they go, well, the front of the building collapsed. And I go, I don't have cameras out in front, so I don't know what happened. So I go, I'll be right there. I called my manager, Larry, who lives like 2 blocks away. He rushed in. Fastest trip downtown you could imagine. I drove like a maniac to get downtown. And then I was just like in shock. It was the facade the sidewalk was just covered with limestone. And thank God it happened at 10 o'clock in the morning and not at 11 o'clock that night, because that was our opening party for Movement. And we were actually doing a benefit for the United Music Academy for Wajid's organization. We had 11 DJs lined up that night.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it could have been pretty horrific.
yes.
We're glad that it was not, that things did not unravel in a way where where people were injured. But what happened? Why did the building partially collapse?
Well, the city required that we actually hire a structural engineer. So his job was to come and determine basically what caused the separation. And when he went up on the roof, he did his inspection, and his report said that there was absolutely no water damage between the facade and the actual structure. So that wasn't part of it. His unofficial determination, we've had a sinkhole in front of the bar for 20 years. And it's been repaired and re-repaired, but I don't think it was ever really repaired properly. And later on, my bartenders were telling me, you're not here when it's dead, but like when we're here and there's just a few people and there's trucks driving down Cass, you can physically feel the building shake.
Oh, that's worrisome.
Yeah. So, my Miller driver last week also said the exact same thing. He says he has to go around it because as he's going through that repair, all the bottles in his truck just shake wildly.
Oh my goodness. You were told that Temple Bar would be up and running after this huge event in about 6 weeks.
Correct.
It took 7 months. Why did it take so long to reopen?
Step by step, we had to go and get, we couldn't get a construction permit from the city of Detroit without the blessing of the Historic Commission. So the architect had to submit plans to the Historic Commission. The contractor actually had ordered all the materials. I don't know, probably have seen them. They were out there for like 8 weeks. And unfortunately, the Historic Commission required that everything be replicated in not only the same look, but in the exact same materials. So rather than using modern technology and doing a lighter, concrete type of material to replicate the facade, we actually had to have it done in limestone again.
So this was a very meticulous process, keeping your historical district designation. Could you talk a little bit more about what that process was like?
Yeah, the Historic Commission meets once a month. So we've been going to their meetings and submitting plans. And, they find, the first issue was the material and the replication. And then every meeting afterwards was, this needs to be corrected on the architectural plans. Then this needs, but it wasn't like and they have an amazing staff. Okay, that preps you before you go to the actual hearing. And I'm very thankful for the support that we got from the staff and, even the commission. It's like, they have rules and regulations. The city The city inspectors, honest to God, have been amazing through this entire process, extremely helpful, but they couldn't bypass the requirements set forth by the Historic Commission.
With all of the challenges and the hoops that you had to jump through to maintain the historic designation, did you think about dropping it? I mean, how valuable was it to you to keep that historic designation?
I think it's pretty important because if you look around us, what this neighborhood was is not what it is today. You know, the changes, and I'm not saying they're all bad, but we definitely need to keep some of the historic things. I sat on the board of Cass Corridor Neighborhood Development Corporation, and in turn, we also tried to maintain a lot of the original housing that was set forth in this neighborhood. That's what people forget, that the corridor was a residential neighborhood with businesses splattered throughout the neighborhood. All these empty lots and parking lots that you see at one time were buildings that housed people.
Mm-hmm. You've created a lot of community with the Temple Bar. It makes me think about your bartenders. You have a staff of 5 bartenders. They all came back. They had to hold out for a long time. They could have gotten jobs elsewhere and just said farewell to the Temple Bar. Why do you think they stuck around?
I'm hoping they love and appreciate me, but I think they also love and appreciate our guests. They've been with me for a long time. They understand my value structure to not only the community, but to every guest that walks in. You know, I'm pretty demanding that people, whoever you are or whoever you want to project to be, you are given your respect. That's the one thing I don't tolerate. And I tell my staff, you have the right to show the exact same respect that you're given. And I'm never going to question it. You know, they come off like something or another, you treat them like something or another. I'm not going to check you because you represent my value structure. You represent the values that my parents instilled in me. It's that simple.
You're listening to the Metro on WDET. I'm Tia Graham alongside Robin Vincent. We're speaking with George Boukas, owner of Temple Bar. We're talking about the recent reopening of his bar after it had to close because the building partially collapsed. Now, want to take a step back, take a look back, get in a time machine here. Your dad and his brother opened the bar in the 1920s. Why did they want to open the bar in the first place? Now, are we talking about prohibition here?
We are.
Oh, my. So talk about that.
My dad was an older gentleman. He was 65 when I was conceived. So, yeah. So they came to Detroit from Greece to get away from the Greek Civil War. My dad and my uncle Nick came to the city of Detroit. They actually lived on Henry Street, which is just the other side of 75. And they, for whatever reason, Masonic Temple was being built. And that was the clientele. That's why it's called the Temple Bar, because of the building of Masonic Temple. And that's what they brought. They wanted to create that community and make money so they could send money back home to support their families.
And just, thinking about all the stories that we talk about here on the Metro, the immigrant story, the story of coming in and finding a new space and a new place, if you can, just talk about the importance of having that history from Greece and bringing it over here to America and what it's mean to you to have this legacy of Temple Bar.
Once again, it goes back to their values. Yeah. People are people. That's how, when I was 6 years old during the riots in the Temple Bar, it was like just a variety of people, black, white, gay, straight. We had the gold dollar, which most people think, that's where Jack White came from. But prior to that, it was a drag bar. Yeah. And we had they were accepting of everyone. I remember, it was a poor neighborhood. My mom, they would cook and they would have rent parties to help people pay their rent. That's the community that I was raised around. Those are that's just how I was raised.
And it's so interesting. I just saw that term come up again on social media while we're speaking of social media rent parties. Someone said, why haven't we brought rent parties back? Because rent's so high. So I love that you brought that in there. But, as we continue on and we go towards the end of this conversation, returning to the historic designation, this process is really hard for you in Temple Bar. Do you think there's anything the city should be doing to make it easier for people who want to rebuild and want to keep that historic designation?
There's a couple of things. I think the first and foremost thing is that the commission should meet at least twice a month. Okay. But the other side of it, as you sit through these meetings, it's repetition. They need to create a guidebook where, there was an older lady there that had been trying to replace her windows for 8 months. She'd been to 8 meetings. It's like, why isn't there a guideline to help people through this process where, it's a reference? It's the same thing over and over again. There should be have a resource of contractors that are able to help you, just so that people can survive and not be so stressed out.
And, the bar's clientele has changed over the years. We're going to go back to the bar because we're going to end up in the conversation. But the bar and the clientele has changed over the past few years. You talked a little bit about it, which I thought was interesting, hearing about the sports lovers coming into Temple Bar and starting to use it as a place to watch sports and gather there. So how do you manage to keep the bar open with so many different folks now visiting Temple Bar?
The bar's gone through so many changes. When I bought the bar in '88, the first clientele we got was actually interracial couples, because the city was so segregated.
Yeah.
There were white bars and black bars, but nobody wanted the interracial couples. Then we became we got a gay following, which we still have today, a very healthy LGBTQ plus community that supports us. And, one of the weirdest things is we had a really huge gay party one night, and it was a hockey game. And I'm a little nervous. I'm going I put a neon rainbow in my door to let people know that we're accepting. The hockey fans started coming in, mingling with the gay kids, and I got a little nervous, to be very honest with you. And then at the end of the night, it was 2:30. We still had 40-plus Red Wings jerseys partying and dancing with the gay kids, and and that's what we're all about. If you don't know that people that are different than you, we're the same. We all have good hearts. We all value the same thing, and we just want to have a good time.
George Boukas is the owner of Temple Bar, which recently reopened after partially collapsing back in May. George, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro and sharing the story of Temple Bar with us.
Thank you for having me, and Happy New Year, guys.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. From the WDET newsroom, the Lions beat the Minnesota Vikings 31-9 at Ford Field, clinching their second straight NFC North Championship and the top seed in the conference playoffs.
Kings in the North.
The Lions finished the regular season with 15 wins and 2 losses. They'll get a week off before hosting a division round playoff game.
Really quickly, Robin, I just want to put in there, Jahmyr Gibbs actually is the leader in NFL regular season touchdowns, okay? He had 4 yesterday in one game. I can't even, Robin.
Those homicide rates are just going to keep going down.
Down. We'll be right back on the Metro. Stay right there.
Welcome back to the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. And for most, people want stability. We yearn for a warm home, nourishing food, and the ability to confide in someone about the problems in our daily lives. But so many of us don't have access to these things, or at least not on a daily basis. That's true in many neighborhoods across Southeast Michigan, particularly where poverty and joblessness persist. That's why Live Outreach exists, L-I-V-E, Outreach. It's a small organization offering resources to children and families in East Point. Right now, Live Outreach is deep into fundraising around the holiday season, and we thought it'd be a good time to check in on their work. Malika Williams is the founder of Live Outreach. She is a self-published author and the mother of 4, and a Detroiter, of course. Malika, welcome to the Metro.
Hello, thank you for having me, y'all.
Of course. So we're going to talk a little bit about Live and the journey you've had 11 years now with the organization.
Yes,
which is amazing.
July will be 11 years, so I'm excited. It's more things to come, so I'm excited to share that with you guys today.
Talk a little bit about that journey, though. You started in 2014. What need did you see at that moment?
Well, I was a foster kid, and I was incarcerated by the time I was 17. I was a teen parent. And so as I got a little bit older and realizing that, I kind of came out of those things, and I wanted to reach back to some of those youth that was similar to my story, or possibly had some of the traumas and things that I had as a kid. So I was connecting with a foster parent that was a foster parent of mine, and we were still in contact. And I was just telling her, like, hey, I really want to put together some programming for some young women that would be like maybe transitioning from foster care. So that's kind of initially how the idea came about. And so she was like, yeah, I think that'd be great. The only thing you can really do is just kind of start. And so I originally started reaching back to some of those places that I was in, like Vista Maria and, Alternative for Girls, and just different organizations that I was familiar with that work with the youth or kids. And so I started volunteering. So that's kind of like just to get a feel of, what that looked like, how that made me feel. And it was like really like something that fueled the passion, like, hey, what else more can I do? And so that's kind of how it initiated. And then, of course, like working with people that was around me, surrounding in the neighborhood, or just people that I maybe have worked with, I started like working with their kids as kind of like a test dummy, kind of like, not saying it like that, but kind of like, hey, how would this work as far as our programming? And then it just pretty much took off from there. Kind of like starting was kind of like placing or starting a program that was essentially like for a younger version of myself.
Yeah.
So I know that it was a lot of resources that I needed at that time by me being a teen mother and things like that. I think I could have avoided that gap of being incarcerated if I would have had some of those initial resources, like, hey, what are you looking forward to? Are you wanting to go to college? Do you want to do a trade? And things like that. Those conversations wasn't being had. So it's kind of like, you just kind of living day to day where you really don't have any plans. So it made me realize that, when youth are in a position where they're like, you got idolized time, like you just got time that you don't really have no school, you don't have, that's where a lot of other things occur in between that time. So that's why I'm like, hey, I think this would be really great.
So many things that I want to unpack there, but one of the first ones, I always ask native Detroiters what part of Detroit they're from.
East Side, of course, East Side.
And I am a newly East Side resident myself. I'm a West Sider, born and raised, but new to the East Side, I really love it, really enjoy living on the East Side. But your organization is in East Point. It's based out of East Point. That's a small city neighborhood right outside of Detroit's East Side. Are there any unique challenges that people are facing within this particular area that you're seeing right now? And just give us a little vibe of what East Point is right now.
So it's not necessarily East Point. We do a lot of more work with the kids in Detroit. Yeah. Some of our, mailing information is East Point, but a lot of the kids that we service is in Detroit. So with the kids that we service and what we've seen and just the small, because, of course, we're a small grassroots organization, so we're able to only grasp so many, but it's almost like, how can I put it, like you're being pulled numerous ways because it's so many different issues. And so when people realize that you are serious about being in a community and you are really doing things like, in July, we gave away like 60 bikes and 80 kites and things like that. So we always have people that say, hey, I'm having a housing situation, or I'm having a domestic situation, things that's kind of like we not prepared for, or we don't have the resources for. So one of the biggest things that we've been working with that we've seen is literacy, right? A lot of the kids, of course, a lot of people don't read. I need to read more myself.
Me
But
too.
one of the things that we notice is we give out books, right? And one time the youth director was asking one of the kids, like, oh, that's a pretty cool book. What's the name or what's the title of the book? And the kid couldn't really say what the title of the book was. So then we start realizing, like, the comprehension. So even if they did know how to read, a lot of kids is not really comprehending what they are reading. To be able to put that in a sentence or form that in a paragraph or however that is. So that's one of our biggest key things that we took from that is like, how can we help the kids? Because then when we start unpacking and removing some of those layers, then we realize it's a lot of parents is a little illiterate as well. So how do you assist with that when you're really trying to work with the kids? But also it's going to be a snowball effect if you're not able to assist what's going on in the household.
Yeah.
So it's just like, to be honest, it's kind of like, you start with one thing, right? Because originally we were like, we're going to just work with girls, right? But then we realized that it's very limited for black males, especially young black males, as far as having programming. It is, but it's very limited. It's more female, oriented, kind of like put together organizations than it is male. And then we were seeing that people were reaching out for the same age demographic, but just the opposite sex. So we're like, okay, now we got to expand it to that. So we know that we can't, resolve everything in one thing, but we're trying to put it together where we will be resourceful as we will have referrals and things like that.
You're listening to The Metro on WDET. I'm Tia Graham alongside Robin Vincent. We're chatting with Malika Williams, founder of Lev Outreach. And I want to talk a little bit about some of your personal experiences and how it's helped informed the work that you've done over the last 11 years come July. So you talked a little bit about growing up in the foster care system. You were a young mom. You had a lot of things that were stacked up against you when you were younger, and you overcame a lot of them. In what ways do you talk to young people, and how do you talk to young people about overcoming these challenges, especially when they may not have a support system around them?
One of the biggest things is I think it's very important for us to explain that every day of life is some type of journey that you're going to have to face, right? So I think that that's the thing. A lot of times we think, hey, if you go to school, you finish this, you get a good job, or whatever the case might be, that, your life is great, you get married to the person you love and blah, blah, blah. But realistically, it's going to be always challenges. That's something that I think that realistically in our particular, in the urban community, I feel like we don't provide enough mental health awareness of coping mechanisms of things that you would go through, right? So that's why I feel like it's a lot of anger, and I'm speaking that from my own personal experience. There's a lot of resentment and things like that because you're like, hey, why this happened to me? Why my life had to be like that? Why? Because when you do have the stack, so many things against you, it's hard to kind of get out of that. It's like being in a deep, dark hole. So you might be lacking in financial literacy. You on top of you don't have the emotional intelligence to be able to unpack some of the things that's going on. So one of the things I think is very important is allowing the kids to have avenues of positive expression, right? Because each kid is not going to be all the same. So kind of like figuring out what works for that kid, because that's what I understand too. Individually, we are our own individuals, where a lot of times we are in all these clusters of groups, right? And just because you come from an environment that is not, as wealthy and you don't have all the resources doesn't mean that you don't have, because I still kind of grew up in that, but my parents still had certain type of morals and integrity that they instilled in me, which allowed me, no matter what obstacles I face, though, those are the things that I still tap back into, right? And sometimes you got kids that don't have that, where
strong foundation,
right, even where they wasn't taught like education, you need these things, you need to read and blah blah blah. Even in the circumstances of the trauma that I went through, my parents still voiced education extremely a lot between me and my siblings. Like, we just knew that might be an avenue of getting out of the things that we were in, that we know that we gotta, if nothing else, we gotta educate ourselves, because knowledge is something nobody can take from you, right? You just have to be able to utilize that in a way that'll get you out of that.
So we got 1 minute, because we're running it. We got 1 minute. I really wanted to get to the mobile unit that you guys are working on to bring these resources to the community and bring them to the different neighborhoods across the city of Detroit. So yeah, go ahead and just talk to us about that.
Yeah, so the mobile hub, we got a 14-passenger bus that we purchased. We've been working with the University of Detroit Mercy, DC. They've been great. They actually designed the hub and, to give us something tangible. So when we're asking investors or donors and things to assist us with that, we can show them what that looks like. So this is to provide fresh fruit, books, toiletry items, possibly socks, underwear, T-shirts, things like that. We just kind of know that the transportation barrier has been another thing for our kids and our families. So we want to kind of be able to pull up, even if it's at the park or, at a school, at a library where we know the families are. That way that wouldn't limit us, and also that would put us where our overhead is low.
All right. We are going to talk so much more about the Live Outreach organization. Malika Williams is the founder of Live Outreach, a youth empowerment organization. Live is looking for funds to get a mobile unit up and running to get more resources to more families in need. Malika, thank you so much. And once again, we'll have you back soon.
Yes, thank you again.
This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation.
Welcome back to the Metro on 1019 WDET FM, WDET's daily news and culture show. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. In this next hour, we'll revisit a few of our favorite conversations. We're starting with Tia's conversation with a local entrepreneur who set up shop right here in Detroit.
That's right. Yalitza Jean Charles is the founder of Healthy Roots Dolls. Charles got into the doll making business because she wants to expand how Black women and girls view their own hair. Hair matters. It's an important part of making a good impression. Its color, length, and style signal who we are and gives us confidence. But for Black women, embracing their natural hair texture has been difficult. And for many years, kinks and curls and coils have been called nappy. So Black women have gone to great lengths to make our hair more presentable. The use of chemicals and pressing combs to straighten our hair, and it often left burning memories. When someone is rarely considered beautiful on the outside, it can be challenging for them to see the beauty of themselves inside. This is why Charles created a doll with kinky, coily, curly hair for young Black kids of color. She joined the show in November to discuss how she expects her doll to make an impact and why she chose Detroit as the place to grow her business. Let's take a listen. What part of Detroit?
Oh my goodness. I am a transplant. I've been here for almost 5 years.
What was it about Detroit that brought you here? I always wonder when I hear about a transplant coming here and kind of setting up shop and turning it to home. What made you turn Detroit to home?
Oh, that's such a great question. I originally came here through Ohio, actually, and I'm a native New Yorker. Wow. So I've always been attracted to cities, the culture, the people, what you learn from each other, the community that you can build. And when I saw Detroit was growing in that way, especially with supporting entrepreneurs, and I had the opportunity to come here through an accelerator program, I said, why not? There were so many people who I didn't even realize were based here, so many entrepreneurs who were inspiring me that I discovered here and got to meet, and I was amazed by it. So I thought it was a great place to continue growing.
I think about Black Tech Saturdays and the ecosystem. Yes, the ecosystem that it's creating, and you just came to mind. Like, that's the perfect place for someone like you trying to build your business. I love that. So the company Healthy Roots Dolls started out as a class project. And while you were attending Rhode Island School of Design, what was the project and what what originally came to mind?
Yes, so while studying at RISD, I was doing an illustration major, and the class project was actually in 3D illustration, where I actually took Rapunzel, who, typically has this very long hair, and it's straight, and it's blonde, and I got to reimagine her as a little brown-skinned girl with kinky, curly, coily hair, and a lot of my classmates were like, wow, that actually kind of looks like a doll. I was like, oh, okay, I guess I can see it. I see it.
I love it too because once again, Rapunzel's known for this long, straight, beautiful,
blonde
sleek,
hair.
I think about Tangled, love Tangled so much. But I think about that look there. So when your classmates are seeing this for the first time, you're seeing this for the first time, you get this idea, a doll. When that sparked, did you think I can actually create a doll that could be seen across the country?
No. I was like, this is a class project. I did not come to school to make toys. But when we had the conversation online, because I shared the project with other people, like my classmates, my peers, my friends, it started a conversation with other women of color where we realized, I actually never had a doll that had my nose, my lips, my skin, my hair, all in the same thing, and actually made it feel like I saw myself in my toys and that I could actually learn to love my hair. Because what I realized is we were getting a lot of dolls that were painted brown, and you have to do more than paint a doll brown in order to connect with children of color.
I mean, Robin, you
we were
felt
talking
that.
about this. Yes. I mean, as an Arab American, I never saw growing up dolls that looked like me. I saw blonde-haired dolls with very fine features, and it really. It took a toll on me in ways I didn't really understand until probably at the point where I decided to dye my hair blonde. And I'll tell listeners I have naturally dark brown, almost black hair. And I realize now, looking back at that time period, that was me trying to conform to a certain beauty standard that society had told me I needed in order to be beautiful.
Robin. And Yalitza, bringing you back into this conversation and bringing Robin's tidbit in there as well. When we think about, because I was so interested about, putting the doll together and getting it all assembled and what it looks like. You talked about painting, and it's more than just painting. How are you finding the different dolls, the different, I guess you can say, molds there? Ooh. And then as well with the hair, because I know for Black women it's a lot to go to the beauty supply, finding different hair and matching it and all this other stuff. So how did you do it for the dolls?
So this is the part that I love because I get to remind people that I went to art school and I learned how to make things. So I actually do not manually make the dolls myself. These are mass produced, but I did design them. Yeah. And that gave me the opportunity to make my own custom molds inspired by the features that I saw around me. So looking at some of the actresses at the time that were really popular, like Lupita Nyong'o and Viola Davis, and the women in my life and my family being like, I love just your face in general. Like, it's gorgeous. Like, I would love to bring that onto a doll. So doing a wider nose, fuller lips. So I got to design that, and I took it from sketch to 3D rendering to mass production, getting the mold created. And then with the hair, that is the most challenging part. Yes. Because the industry only knows what the industry already does. And so I'm forcing them to learn how to mimic something different, something that hasn't been represented. And I spent a lot of time watching little wigs dry, like washing them with shampoo, using the conditioner, doing puck braids, bantu knots. So I spent a lot of time manually working with the hair myself until I found the fiber that mimicked the experience I wanted kids to have the best. So it was a labor of love, and I did it for the kids.
Wow. And once again, for folks who aren't really, up to speed or understand what it takes to go through all of that, I mean, it takes a lot, and it takes a lot to process the hair and to put the hair together. And like you said, washing it, blow drying, pressing, flack, or whatever you're going to do to it to make sure that it holds up for a long time, but also holds up in a kid's hand so they can learn how to use it. So if you are just listening to the Metro, just tuning in to the Metro on WDET Public Radio, I'm Tia Graham here with Robin Vincent, and we're chatting with the founder of Healthy Roots Dolls, Yalitza Jean Charles. And we're talking about the kinky curly hair dolls that she's helped manufacture and create herself. Staying on topic of representation, let's talk about what the reception has been like from little kids when they see it. What do they do?
Okay, so the first thing is always, oh my gosh, she looks just like me. We have a lot of unboxing videos when the girls are screaming. And does the doll look exactly like this kid? No, not exactly like them, but enough for them to see themselves in it. And I think that's so beautiful. So we went from our first doll, Zoe, to creating 2 more different dolls with different skin tones. They have different facial features, different hair textures to represent the beauty of the diaspora so that more children could see themselves in our products. And my favorite part is actually watching kids do matching hairstyles. So the curl friends get to be a part of wash day, and they get to do like matching twists, matching braids, and they literally drag these dolls all over the place. So I think the reception has been good.
I mean, just seeing a little girl with her doll on wash day would just set my soul on fire, because wash day is one of the days that I dread myself. So
It's a great day. Yeah.
For me, it's just like, oh gosh, here we go. But, when we talk about self-worth, once again, and representation, and Robin talked about it a little bit as well, just not really seeing yourself represented, especially growing up. For me, it really did suck not seeing that. So what does it do for self-worth, especially for young Black girls, young girls of color, and then hair education? 'Cause that's a huge thing.
So when I was doing my research to develop the product, because it wasn't just enough to have the idea, I had to understand what the problem was and how I could potentially solve it in a way that had true impact. So the problem is the fact that over 50% of children in this country are of color. But the toy aisle, when I started, did not fully reflect that. And then when I did more research, I learned that only 4 out of 10 girls love their curls. And it should be 10 out of 10.
It should be 10 out of 10.
It should be 10 out of 10. And then when I started studying and doing more research, I discovered the Brown versus Board of Education trial, where they did the Mamie Clark doll test, which measured racial bias in children with baby dolls. And they ascribed negative attributes to the Black dolls and positive attributes to the white dolls. So what we know from the research is that toys influence how kids think, act, and see themselves. So when little Black girls can't find dolls that look like them, it can negatively impact their self-esteem. So if we have 50% of the country which has kids of color, they need to have products that look like them.
Oh man, I just once again love everything that this stands for, and especially when we get into hair education. For me, growing up, I had a Brat style head, and I would often use the Brat style head, but it's not representative of the head that grew on my hair. I learned a lot from it, don't get me wrong, but I could have went a step further if I had hair that was textured like mine on a doll's head. So can you go into the hair education, especially for young girls?
So for me, I was very fortunate that my mother was a woman who could braid. She would do like hearts and stars, and I learned from her, and I was practicing on my dolls, but it still wasn't the same experience. And it wasn't until college that I actually learned how to take care of my hair as it naturally grew out of my scalp. So when I saw that impact that toys have on children, I saw an opportunity to use it as an educational hair tool, because girls are already playing with their dolls' hair, but if they could have something that actually mimicked their real hair, that they could use real hair care products on, we could take it a step further, because there is an issue within the Black community of young Black girls not knowing how to love and take care of their hair. We think our hair is difficult. We're being difficult on our hair. Our hair is not difficult. We need to learn to love our hair and allow it to do what it does. If it's growing up towards the sun, that's great. Let it do that. And here are the products we can use to take care of it. And they learn that by practicing on the dolls, which is why I think wash day is fun, because now you have your doll to play with while your mom or dad or whoever's watching you is doing your hair. So we get to bring in the hair education and empower them to love their hair rather than feeling like they have to change it in order to be beautiful.
And when you talk about, that's why you love wash day, and I hear you say that, I think about possibly if I would have had something that would have been a little bit more, looked more like me or represented me, maybe I wouldn't hate wash day so much. Maybe I would have a little better connection to it.
We need to get you a doll.
No, exactly. So I can get back to practicing like I used to. I love doing hair. So I would love to get one of the dolls as well. But just thinking about, how we connected, you and we connected organically on social media, just saw it there, reached out to you, and you were receptive. So it was great to bring you onto the Metro today. But I also was snooping, and I saw that you were attending a seminar at Harvard. What was it like being in that historically white space, and what were some of the things that you were there to learn?
Oh, it was so interesting, because I was actually talking to my friends about my college experience, because, everyone's like, shoot for the stars, apply to every Ivy. And walking on that campus, I was like, you know what? I went to the school I was supposed to go to, and that's fine. I do definitely think that we are allowed to be in those spaces as well. And I think about how important diversity is as a part of your education, because you're not just learning from your professors, you're learning from your peers. So I did enjoy, when I did get on campus, hearing people speaking in different languages and seeing how diverse it was. And it gave me the opportunity to connect with other entrepreneurs in the social impact space and recognize how important it is to run our businesses as businesses so that we can have bigger impact.
Yes. And once again, it's about Healthy Roots Dolls and where you all see yourselves in the future, next 10 years, next 5 years, next 10 years. Where do you see yourself?
A movie. No, I'm just kidding. I'm still waiting for my moment to run into a little kid holding my doll. I get lots of people that I know who take pictures and be like, I saw a girl with your doll. I saw a girl with your doll. I think that's great. We definitely want to expand and create more products. That's really important to us. So not just the dolls, but creating more educational experiences through play with new products and just continuing to spread curl power.
Curl power. Do you have that trademarked?
Yes.
Oh, I love that. Curl power. Oh my gosh. Yalitza Jean Charles is the founder of Healthy Roots Dolls. Healthy Roots Dolls can be found at healthyrootsdolls.com. Yalitza, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro today.
Thank you for having me.
That was Yalitza Jean Charles, who joined the Metro in November to discuss how she expects her doll to make an impact and why she chose Detroit as the place to grow her business. And just a mini plug here, we connected through social media. So there are good and bad points of social media, but this one was a good one.
From the WDET newsroom, a recent legal filing says the project to replace and repair Flint's lead pipes is almost finished. Last year, the state of Michigan took over the project from the city. State attorneys say final excavations, replacements, and restorations should be complete before August. Critics, including the National Resources Defense Council, have complained about the pace and thoroughness of the lead pipe replacement project.
Coming up, we'll revisit a conversation we had about the power of poetry following the passing of poet icon Nikki Giovanni. You're listening to The Metro. We will be right back.
Welcome back to the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. Now we'll take a listen back to one of my conversations with Detroit's Poet Laureate, Jessica Care Moore. Just ahead of the conversation, we had learned that poet and writer Nikki Giovanni had passed away. So I wanted to reach out to Jessica Care Moore and get her response and her feelings about Giovanni's legacy, impact on Black storytelling, and what she meant to Jessica Care Moore. So here is that conversation. For many, the civil rights movement in this country never ended. It just evolved. Nikki Giovanni made sure to capture what those moments meant for Black people in America with the written word. Her poetry often held a sense of urgency for Black Americans, one that was meant to unify and protect one another. An activist at her core, Giovanni made sure to stay true to who she was, proud to be, an unapologetic Black woman. She made it a point to write exclusively in African American vernacular English or AAVE or slang. No code switching. She lived as she was. Awards aside, Giovanni was a lifelong learner and teacher of love. Her works remain a representation of the times and a love letter to the people. Sadly, Giovanni died yesterday at the age of 81. And Jessica Care Moore, a world-renowned poet, author, and musician, also Detroit's Poet Laureate, she joins us live now to talk about the life and the impact of Nikki Giovanni. Jessica, welcome back to the Metro.
Good morning, y'all. How you doing? Thank you for having me.
Doing really well, and thank you for joining us this morning. I know it was really, really heavy on your mind. I saw last night you started to post, and this morning as well, just really, really on your mind. So, why was she so important to the world of poetry and literature?
I mean, she was the rock star, before, a lot of the Black Arts Movement writers, and some who are still with us, like, thank goodness, like Sonia Sanchez and Baba Hakeem Madabuti out of Chicago. Nikki Giovanni's name resonated with everyday folks. And so when I was even first coming, reading my poems when I was like 19, 20, 21 years old, most of, especially older Black women, heard me. That was the first name that they knew. Besides Maya Angelou, her name was like a household name for a poet, and for an American poet at that. And so I think that's why, because we can't remember, I can't remember personally my journey as a poet without Nikki Giovanni as foundation. And if you'll talk to any woman poet, any poet for that matter, that's connected to Black Arts Movement, Harlem Renaissance, and to contemporary writing now, that she's always one of the ones. She may not be the only, but you have to call her name. And I think that's the why, is because every folks who read poetry and folks that didn't write poetry knew who Nikki Giovanni was.
And when we speak about the life of Nikki Giovanni, and I think about you and who you are, especially in the world of poetry and spoken word, I think about when you first heard Nikki Giovanni actually, or first read a poem from her that really resonated with you. Do you remember that moment?
I mean, no, I don't remember the first time. I was a little girl. I mean, my mother introduced me to Nikki and Alice Walker and those writers, and Lorraine Hansberry and countless others when I was just probably like 7th and 8th grade. But I do remember when I met her. I was a young poet, and there was a BET show. I don't think it was one of the 6 at Parkers before that, and they had a lot of poets from New York. We'd come up to read poetry with her, and I was awestruck, that I was even in the room with her. And I think about all my early writing from my first book, The Words Don't Fit in My Mouth, like all of that resistance poetry and all of that, defiance and that fearlessness that was in my work very young, is because of reading Nikki Giovanni, because of hearing Ego Tripping and saying, she was, and the rappers, really respect her. I talked to Talib Kweli yesterday, and he was like, she was the GOAT. She was Thug Life. Like, she represented and loved, and she loved Tupac. She had Thug Life tattooed on her body. And she did that for her sister Afeni when she lost Tupac Shakur. So she also loved this thing called hip hop and saw the connection between hip hop and poetry, and we loved her for that as well. But yeah.
And the Bashar al-Assad regime fell to rebel fighters after a civil war in Syria that lasted more than a decade. We also saw severe weather displace thousands and cause billions of dollars in damage from hurricanes and tornadoes. Mother Nature brought some beautiful things too, though. We saw the northern lights in Detroit and a total solar eclipse.
Which I did not look at. Did not look at that. Meanwhile, Detroit hosted 775,000 visitors for the NFL draft. And the Lions are having their best season in generations right now. What a time to be alive and be a Lions fan, America's team. And that's just scratching the surface. Now, we do want to take a look ahead at stories we're keeping an eye on as a team on the Metro here. And here to talk to us a little bit more about what they're following, we've got our producers, Sam Corey, Carrie Jr. II, and David Lyons here. Welcome on this side of the mic, guys.
Oh, thanks so much.
Good morning. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year. So, Sam, we're starting with you. Let's talk about what's on your mind for 2025. Let's start local. What are you looking at for Detroit and Metro Detroit?
Yeah, well, y'all had just a really long list of interesting, inspiring, sad, a lot of different things happened last year, as they'll continue this year. And you mentioned one of them that I do want to talk about, Mayor Mike Duggan. Specifically him running as an independent candidate for governor. I know a lot of folks are talking about this. I think they're talking about it for a lot of different reasons. One, Mayor Duggan's a savvy politician, and he had a really good 3 terms as mayor, according to a lot of folks. He is a very pragmatic person. He's not an ideologue, but he got things done when people asked him to get streetlights on, to remove blight, to add speed bumps. He used federal dollars to clean up parks. And he renewed rec centers. Like, there's a lot that he worked on, and he sat with people for a very, very, very long time. And then he tried to just accomplish what people asked for. Leaving my own, opinions aside, he's just a quite popular person. And so for him to decide to run for governor is a big deal. But then for him to decide to run as an independent is just enormous. I mean, there's a lot of questions about what this will mean for the Democratic Party, I guess to a certain degree nationally, but really in the state of Michigan, locally, how it changes potentially, how it tries to adapt to his run. And I don't know all the calculus. I want to learn a little bit more about why he's running as an independent, but there's got to be a good reason for it because he's won before and presumably he really wants this position. So this is something that I'm looking at, and there's a lot to look into there.
Sam, I'm curious, do you think that Duggan running as an independent could help or hurt him?
Well, I don't know the answer to that. Again, I think the big thing is, like, he did this for a reason. I don't think he just did this for show or he's trying to, like, change our political culture. I think he's actually trying to win. And so he thought that this was the most strategic thing to do. Now, Michigan is a purple state, so there's something there, but like, he's one of the most prominent Democrats in the state, certainly in Southeast Michigan. And so for him to decide to do that, there's calculus there. Maybe he didn't think he would win the primary. There's other people, other pretty big names that he's got to go against. So, it's a question that I'm very curious about because I think it was strategic, and I want to sort of unravel that and also try to understand how it's going to shake up our local politics.
I mean, there's something to be said about the divisiveness of our politics today, right? And maybe, I don't know this to be true, but for